Welcome to the Floyd Memorial Library podcast, where we sit down with the people who give shape, texture, and voice to life on the North Fork of Long Island. Some are rooted here by generations, others arrived by chance or choice, but all carry with them a piece of the story. We talk about what's changing, what's worth holding on to, and the currents of history, both quiet and loud, that run through this place. I'm your host, Christopher Bianchi, and for episode 166, we sit down with Paulette Satur and Eberhard Müller, the husband and wife team behind Satur Farms on the North Fork. Before founding the farm, Paulette built her career in horticulture and the wine industry, while Eberhard earned acclaim as a chef at some of New York's most celebrated restaurants. Their paths first crossed when Paulette was first selling wine to one of Eberhard's restaurants, sparking both a personal and professional partnership that would soon lead them to purchase farmland here on the East End. What began as a way to supply Eberhard's restaurants with the freshest produce has since grown into one of the region's most respected farming operations, known for its specialty greens and herbs, and trusted by top chefs and retailers alike. In our conversation, we'll talk about their journey before farming, the challenges and opportunities of growing produce, the evolution of the farm-to-table movement, and their hopes for the future of agriculture and the North Fork community. So I hope you enjoy episode 166 with Paulette Satur and Eberhard Müller. This episode was recorded May 27th, 2025. Thank you so much for coming on the Floyd Memorial Library podcast today. It's really great to have you on today.
You're welcome. Pleasure to be here.
Thank you.
Same here.
So just to start off, before founding Satur Farms, you each both had very different careers. Paulette in horticulture and the wine industry, and Eberhard as a celebrated chef in Europe and New York. Can each of you share a bit about your background and how those early experiences shape your approach to farming today?
Certainly. I have degrees in horticulture and plant physiology, and I actually worked for a couple of years for Hargrave Vineyard, selling wine. And I fell in love with the North Fork then. That was like in 1988, I believe, 89. And at that time, though, I was single and I thought, well, I should have more of a life. And I moved to the city and worked for a wine importer distributor, selling premium wines to restaurants and stores. And that's how I met my husband, selling wine to him. He had just taken over Lutece in the city. And at that point, it was 1990, the recession. Things were rough in the city. It was very quiet. And so when I heard that he had taken over Lutece, I quickly, tried to get an appointment to sell him wine, and he put me off. No, the list is done. His wine sommelier told me, and that was that. So he had gotten reviewed in December of that year, and so in January, it was my girlfriend's birthday, and we used to take each other out for our birthdays. And I said to her, would you like to go to Lutece? I'm trying to sell him wine and he's not biting. So she said, of course I'd like to go. We went, and his sommelier came to him in the kitchen and said, I think you might like to meet the wine salesperson sitting at this particular table. And he's like, no, I don't. And she's like, yeah, you do. And so he came out, and he... I'll cook for you. He's standing at the table. And so that was basically how we met.
Wonderful. And then what about your background?
Well, I came to this country in 1982. I was living in Paris. I had in a major restaurant in Paris. I was sous chef back then. And I used to do travel arrangements with the owner of the restaurant, cooking dinners in various cities around the Europe and in the United States. And at one point we came to New York, actually in 1981, we came to New York, and I cooked at Windows on the World in the Trade Center. And it just so happened that the general manager there of the company who run Windows on the World was a fellow from Munich in Germany. And after 2 or 3 days, he said to me, if you ever want to come to the United States and work in New York, we'd be really happy to sponsor you and get you a visa to come here. So a year later, I contacted him and said, Tony, I'm ready to take you up on your offer if that offer still stands. So I came in 82 and I worked at Windows on the World for 3.5 years. After that, I left and I went to open Le Bernardin in New York City with Gilbert and Maggie Lecause. I was the executive chef for 6 years.
Wow.
We got 4 stars from the New York Times twice in that period. And that restaurant is still around, and I'm very proud of that, obviously. I left that and did some other stuff, and I went to, when Andre Soldner of Lutece was trying to retire, they contacted me and saw if I was between jobs, so I had nothing lined up. So I went there and I looked around and I said, yeah, I think could be a fun proposition for a while. And to make a long story short, I met Paulette at Lutece, and then we moved on to farming.
Yes.
Well, you sort of missed something in the middle. You he took my phone number out of the reservation book. He swore to me that he had never done it prior and has not done it since. But yes, he called me. And at first I thought, I don't want to date a chef. I'm a morning person. I don't like being restaurants late at night and everything, but we kind of clicked, and we had similar backgrounds in a sort of a strange way. I grew up on a farm in central Pennsylvania. It was a dairy farm, and Eberhard grew up in his parents' bakery in the Black Forest of Germany, a small little town, little village. And so we both had parents who were at work at 4 a.m. and had strong work ethics. And so when it came to us having the discussion, what would you like to do with your life? And I said, I've been wanting to buy a place out in the country. And he said to me, well, that'd be great. We could grow things for, my restaurant. And so we met in January, kind of solidified our relationship in July, got engaged in October, and were married on Christmas Day, all in the same year.
Yeah, I didn't forget about it, but I know it's the law.
No, but even before we get to the farm out here, I was curious. So in your family, you have a history of baking?
Yeah, my parents had a bakery. I grew up in a bakery in Germany, and I wasn't first in line to take over the bakery, so there was no question that I wasn't going to become a baker. And besides that, I had more interest in traveling the world than seeing myself in a small village in the Black Forest for the rest of my life. I knew that already when I was 10 years old, and so I became a chef's apprentice in a hotel restaurant in the Black Forest, and went through the traditional procedure, the traditional education in terms of my chef career.
Yes.
So that was very disciplined, very hardworking, 6 o'clock in the morning to 2 o'clock or 2:30 in the afternoon, and then 5 o'clock to 10 o'clock at night.
And you were 13.
13
That's
when
the
I started.
traditional German apprenticeship program. You move away from home.
No
and
college.
You start working.
No college parties until no college parties until 24, 25.
Well, it's a very respected tradition, the apprenticeship programs, whether
It is.
you're,
Is that
studying to be chef or studying to be a shoemaker. It's a very exalted
carpenter and anything,
yes.
any trade profession in Germany has a long history of this type of apprenticeship where you leave school and you go to a place where there is a master craftsman, and he will educate you in his craft, and you have to go to spend some time every year, about 3 months in a school, in a vocational school, so that you're not completely just focused on your thing. You got some master education in that school too.
There's a famous opera based on German apprenticeship programs, which is called
the Meistersinger from Wagner. Richard Wagner wrote an opera, a very long opera about this traditions, the apprenticeship programs, and the Meistersingers are actually all craftsmen, master craftsmen, who have a singing competition, and this is in the 17th century or something like that. It's kind of a famous opera.
It's one of your favorites.
It is.
And I was curious, when you initially came over was that your first time coming over to the U.S., and what did you think
in 81, it was the first time come to the United States. Yeah.
What did you think of New York City and the restaurants?
New York City in the early 80s just came out of that big recession.
Yes.
And the Bronx was burning.
Yes.
The subways were not running. It was crime infested. And when I told my siblings and my father, who was still alive at that time, that I was planning to go to the United States, they were already shocked when I said I was going to move to Paris. But then to New York was like, oh my God, what are you going to do to yourself? And I did, and I had a contract for 3 years at Windows on the World, and I stayed 3.5, and then I don't know if I was going to be able to go back to New York after New York, to Paris. After New York, it's very hard to live anywhere else, I think. I spent 6 years in Paris before I came to New York. So it's big city, and going back to Paris was obviously the culinary center of the universe at that point still. And when I left, I had real opportunities, and I probably could have established myself again in Paris, but life happens, and you stay here.
Yes.
Yeah, and then you meet a woman, and then the trouble starts.
And what was, in terms of you, Paulette, with the wine industry out here and the Hargraves, that was in the 80s?
Yes, like 88, 89.
What did you think of the area at that time in the wine industry? And I know it was probably hard getting restaurants in New York City to showcase.
I was excited about the region from the get-go. I thought that the wines particularly had beautiful aromas. The nose on the wines were just gorgeous. And whether it was the Sauvignon Blanc from Hargrave or from James Porter, or, the reds and whites from Lens, I thought it had great potential. And I honestly didn't have such a problem making placements. The Four Seasons restaurant, Gramercy Tavern, at that time, the restaurants were becoming sort of younger and a little hipper, and they found the wines intriguing as well. I remember I got the Lens Gewürztraminer poured by the glass at
Four Seasons.
Jean-Georges.
Oh.
Okay.
at Jean-Georges' restaurant. And Eberhard, I think, also found them, found interest in the wines. And so,
when she was out here and when I was working in the restaurants in New York City, wine lists were very, very French focused.
Mm-hmm.
There was not this multicultural, multinational wine lists that we have today. Today, if you have a restaurant and you don't have American wines or Italian wines and French wines and Austrian wines, and we were in a restaurant last week in the city, Slovakian wines and Greek wines and so on, and they're all delicious, especially, and that was sort of started sort of in that time in the 80s, late 80s, early 90s. And when you started selling wines in New York City, there was a real trend to diversify culturally in terms of wines. It was very interesting. And today you go to any restaurant. I mean, today, back in the 80s, restaurants used to be primarily French.
Mm-hmm.
Gramercy Tavern was maybe one of the first ones that was not that French. Maybe the Four Seasons was always an outlier. But the culinary highlights used to be French. Mm-hmm. Today, they're not anymore. I mean, there is still a couple of them. But today, you will have a meal at Tatiana or any of those restaurants in New York City, and they have nothing to do anymore with the French culinary education.
Yes.
I think.
Yes.
So I mean, and we find that intriguing, and it is befitting for New York City, which is such a cosmopolitan city, that it is cosmopolitan in every way, not only in the population that lives there, but also in the cultural backgrounds like food and wine and culture and at the whole. I mean, it's amazing. New York City is just, the capital of the world.
Did you specialize even at your restaurant in French?
Yeah,
cuisine?
I mean, I had a very, very strong background in French cuisine because that's what I was educated.
The cellar you inherited from André Saltner was heavy into Burgundies and Bordeaux, which were fantastic. But then he also started bringing in some other wines, which were more gently priced too.
Yeah, I mean, the restaurants used to be, and high-end restaurants maybe still today, and maybe more so today than 10 years ago. They used to be for a certain segment of the population. Mm-hmm. But in the 90s, late 80s, early 90s, mid 90s, I think restaurants started to broaden their appeal or try to broaden their appeal by being more focused on international foods. Like you go to a restaurant today and you can clearly see South American influences, or you have Mediterranean influences, or you have Thai cooking and all kinds of. It's not this focus on French food anymore.
Yes.
We
that's what it used to be more.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And so I find it much more intriguing and more interesting today than it used to be. Okay. I mean, there's nothing wrong with
classic French.
You love
classic French.
I like classic French, and I do cook quite a bit of it if I, but occasionally, not always anymore.
Yes.
So.
And now, in terms of coming out here and making that decision to start Satur Farms, could you talk a little bit about how that started?
Well, when we started, we didn't even have a functioning well, so we started a large garden so that we could grow things for Lutece, and we drip drip tubes because we didn't have the well that existed didn't have enough water flow, gallons per minute to even overhead irrigate. And so we grew things like salad greens, arugula, heirloom tomatoes, various root crops like baby turnips and baby carrots and leeks.
Wow.
And it was great because I was still selling wine in the city, and we were talking to our friends and colleagues, his chef colleagues, my wine restaurant customers, and many of them were saying, "You're growing things? What are you growing? I'll basically buy anything," because a lot of his colleagues, they came from France and
from Europe.
They were really finding a lack of the fresh food and the food distribution network that existed in New York in the early 80s. And so we would leave Lutece after the dinner service, 11, 12 o'clock at night. We'd drive out here on a Saturday night, and we'd get up early, and we'd weed and seed and water and harvest and wash and pack our vegetables and load up our SUV. And on Monday morning, we'd make deliveries going up Park Avenue, Gramercy Tavern, the Four Seasons, Lutece, Jean-Georges.
This was the first year. And in the first year, we had no idea how much would I need for the restaurant. So we had an abundance of produce that we harvested from this little square quarter acre or whatever it was that we grew produce on. And rather than let it go to waste, we say, okay, let's just try if we can sell it in the city. And she did.
I still remember he was asked to do a cooking course at Degustibus at Macy's. They have they invite chefs to do cooking demos in their studio. And it was the fall. And so, he had created a couple of dishes to cook and demonstrate to the audience attending. And he brings out leeks that we had grown, and there was an audible gasp in the room, and somebody said, "Where did you get those leeks?" Because we grew them with long white blanched shafts, and not common in the States, even though
This was typically European style leeks, where the shafts get hilled as the leeks grow. So as they grow, the shaft stays wide, and it become a foot and a half long if you do it right. And we just planned to do this, and I wanted to have.
And you said, "My wife grew them."
And what year was this that you started?
That was in 97.
97. Okay.
97. We started the farm really in 90s. We bought the farm. Well, no, we signed the lease.
We purchased the farm.
We purchased the farm.
Okay.
In 97, the beginning of 97. And right away we started growing vegetables there.
97, 98.
What was there before that you know
Potato,
Potato.
cauliflower farm.
Well, when I worked for Hargrave, I can remember driving out of their dirt lane to head back home and seeing that farm that year was planted to pumpkins. I think it was Al Glover who had been leasing it and grew pumpkins there. And the sunsets on that farm are just amazing. And the sunset with the pumpkins, no pumpkins now, but the sunset with the pumpkins, I just thought it was beautiful. And when he and I were shopping for a farm, the realtor showed us this, and I'm like, okay, this is it.
Yes.
Yeah, we saw like 3 or 4 farms, but we knew that this was going to be the one that we were going to put a bid on. And we did, and we bought it. So, I mean, and then, from
every year we grew incrementally. So from our first year garden, I can remember when we farmed 11 acres, and then farmed.
There was a step in between where we farmed a fraction of our own farm.
Incremental.
Like, yeah, I mean, it was like 2 or 3 acres the first year in 98, 99. And then we farmed the whole 11 acres or 12 acres that we have there. And then we asked the Hargraves, who still owned Hargrave Vineyard at that point. They had some land across the road from us. There were 35 acres we started farming over there. And what that expansion, of course, came investment, buying equipment and this and that and the other thing. And then one day we said, I don't know what we're going to do. This was in 2000 or 2000. And we decided that there was no way that we could hire somebody and let them run our own business. We needed to be there. And Paulette came out and stayed in 2000, and I was still in the restaurant business at that point. And we decided that we were going to jump in with both feet. So I came out in the end of 2000 or mid-2001, quit my job in the city, and we went into the business together.
Yes.
Yeah, because everything, the equipment, everything we owned ourselves. We bought with our own capital. Where in the restaurant industry, I always had partners or somebody who
investors.
Yeah.
Yes.
So there wasn't any.
We were always self-financed. Every step of the way.
I mean, did it just gradually continue to grow, and that at what point did it expand beyond New York?
The big step was when we leased the
Marlake farm.
At one point, we were farming close to 250 acres here.
Wow.
And
actually more than that.
Then we also leased a warehouse facility in Calverton where we wash, packed, and shipped the greens from. So that was a big move.
But I think when we saw the potential that could be was when 9/11 happened. And the phones rang off the hook when nobody could bring in any food from out into New York City, except if you were located in New York State.
There were no flights allowed in and no trucks allowed across from the state line. And so here we were sitting. At first we thought, oh my gosh, we're going to have to shut down. And the phone started ringing off the hook because we were a local farm.
And that was when we realized, oh my God, there is a huge potential. And that year, or the next year, we started really expanding, looking for more farmland and hiring more labor and doing more production. We leased this 140-acre farm in Peconic, and we started growing on that land and we pushed hard to get those big customers who were for about 6 weeks our best customers, for them to maintain a relationship with them. I mean, a lot of the people, of course, we knew from my background as a chef in New York City. I knew of the Baldors and whatever their names are in New York. But it took time to convince them to get into it. And we started shipping with our own trucks into restaurants about 2002 or 2003. We had our own trucks going into the city from then on and make deliveries to restaurants directly.
We had to do that because distributors weren't interested in us. At that point, there was no locally grown food movement. And I would solicit their business, but they said, we load out west in California. We don't need you. You're not year round. Yeah. And so we started making our own deliveries. It was rough, very, very difficult. Eventually, they did come around, and Eberhard alluded to the fact that they started saying, well, we'll buy from you when you're local, but not when you're growing in Florida in the wintertime. And I'm like, why would you do that? I have tractor payments 12 months a year. And eventually they came around to understand that in order to support us as a local farm, that it would be necessary to do so year-round. And on top of that, Eberhard and his crew became very good growers, and we were really shipping, top-notch produce.
What really accelerated our quality and our commitment to farming was when we started farming in Florida. We could employ people year-round. Mm-hmm. We didn't have to hire a new crew every spring and retrain them and all this.
That's what you were doing up here. You had to do that up
before we started farming in Florida.
Yes,
we had to retrain the crew every year, and it was just very rough. So in 2003, I think we looked in Florida, and we leased land down there, and we took the guys down there and worked with them down there. So basically, they were on the farm. On one of our farms, 12 months a year. Mm-hmm. And that is like when you're a high performance athlete, you can't just go 3 months and then stop saying, okay, well, we're done for now. I'm going to go back to training in 9 months or in 8 months. No, it's the same with farming. You observe better, you see better, you know better what to expect when the weather changes and what happened. It makes you a much better grower. And our guys became very, very proficient, and we were very successful because of that, because we had a crew that was fully trained and could do what needed to be done in order to be competitive in the market in New York City, which is notoriously a real tough and high-end market. And still, to this day, California is still where 95% of the produce comes from in this country anywhere. Yes. So for us to get a niche and a foothold in New York City and in the tri-state area was very important. And it helped us get national recognition and helped us to ship basically from Florida all the way to Maine.
Yes. I mean, I lived in Maine and Florida, so I remember even seeing it at the grocery stores there. So
yeah.
But were you always focused on greens at this point? Or?
Well, I mean, when we first started, we grew everything from A to C, everything in between, asparagus to zucchinis and anything that's in between. And, you can't do everything 100% all the time. So you have to focus on what the market demands, what is the best thing. And one of the other things that we learned was that 2007, 2008, when we had another recession, we realized, wow, we need to make sure that we don't just focus on restaurants. We got into retail and did a lot of retail business. So by the end, our business was about 60% or 70% retail and only 30% restaurant food service, which, it's year round and it's always there. But getting into the retail markets is much more complicated because there's food safety requirements that Paulette had to do. And I mean, it was tremendous amount of work. And we were one of the very few companies or farming operations in New York or at least in Long Island who were certified to ship into the Whole Foods and the grocery chains and so on.
We also wanted to brand our product. And
Right.
so, okay, if you were to sell a leek to, a retail store, you could have a twist tie on it. But our greens, we had these colorful labels with Satur Farms, baby spinach, Satur Farms, wild arugula. And so that's cemented our name in the consciousness of the region.
Mm-hmm. I think there was, probably even over a long period of time, just a change in what people would eat in America back in the 60s and 70s, and you think more of like iceberg lettuce and romaine, but I think there's been a lot more variety.
The issue was that there wasn't anybody who supplied year-round or for a big part of the year from locally grown food, so you could never really put that moniker on it. It's locally grown or it's produced by farmers on Long Island who grow to the standards that the national food safety standards. And also, we alluded to this before, there wasn't any farm-to-table movement before, and that started to kick in with us delivering to restaurants direct. And the farmers markets in New York City took off. There has been a farmers market on Union Square for a long time. I don't know how long, but there weren't any farmers markets in Brooklyn or anywhere. Now you go to any borough and there's at least 3, 4, 5 markets every week in the city.
See, distributors would even, in the beginning, would even say to us, well, yes, Long Island grows good cauliflower, very nice, but it's not available year-round. I have to contract with it out west so that I can get it continuously. Mm-hmm. So, I can't slip in Long Island cauliflower. And that was such a shame, because to this day, Eberhard and I agree, nothing tastes as good as a Long Island head of cauliflower.
Yeah, or potato, for that matter. I mean, we grow our own potatoes for our own table. They're the best.
Well, in the very beginning, we did grow for sale. But Eberhard at one point had opened a restaurant in Las Vegas. This was in 2000. And I remember that because it was Y2K, the year when the switch was happening, and everybody had fears. And we were both in Las Vegas rushing to get it open for New Year's. And he had installed one of his chefs from Lutece in New York to run the restaurant there. And Eberhard's going through the kitchen, tasting everything and he said to his chef, "These potatoes have no flavor." And he said, "I know, chef, they're not like yours from Long Island." He then got me to air freight potatoes to his restaurant in Las Vegas, because nothing beats a Long Island potato.
Yeah, I mean, people don't understand that. And I mean, there's very few chefs who really have that knowledge. I mean, there is people, and obviously, who understand this today. But back then, you opened a box of potatoes that came from Idaho, and you cooked with what. But the guys who were trained in Europe, they knew, because we had access to fresh produce. I worked for 6 years in Paris. I mean, there was a guy coming for mushrooms, wild mushrooms that he had picked the morning before, or fresh beans or carrots. They came in from outside. They drove in from the surroundings of Paris, and they brought produce. And we knew what fresh tasted like. Yes. And still today, I go out in my garden and my greenhouse and cut a head of romaine lettuce, and she says, "Wow, is that sweet? This is so sweet. There's no comparison to the stuff that ships 10 days across country."
Yes, well, it's freshness because of its being local, yes, but it's also the terroir. The terroir here is indeed special. Mm-hmm. The sandy soils, the maritime climate, the sunshine, everything counts toward it. And it just makes for amazing flavors. Yes.
No, and I have seen, I think, when I was growing up into the late 2000s, 2009, 2010, I remember seeing more items with locally grown and I think that has definitely taken off even more. But just how has it been getting freshly harvested produce to customers within 24 hours? What kind of systems or partnerships or infrastructure have you built?
Basically, our aim was to harvest everything this morning starting 6 o'clock in the morning, get it harvested, get it to the packing plant in Calverton by noon or 1 or 2 o'clock, so they could wash and pack, load it to our trucks. The trucks would leave at 2 o'clock in the morning for the city deliveries. 24 hours get to the restaurant by noon.
Yes.
And we did this with retail stores. We did this when we first started working with Whole Foods. We did this with Whole Foods. We delivered Whole Food stores in Manhattan ourselves I was adamant that we wouldn't ship to them to their warehouse.
Yes.
Because, and then they convinced us that they would take our trucks in if we deliver to them, and they would they would wait for their trucks to go out. If we would get there at 3 o'clock in the morning, they would wait for their trucks to get out until they could load our product.
So in other words, when we delivered their distribution center warehouse, they never put us on the shelves. They just unloaded our product and put it onto their smaller trucks for delivery immediately. We were never inventoried with them. So it was sort of guaranteed more fresh because it was heading right out.
And we helped them develop a system that they implemented afterwards with a lot of other producers in other areas, in other... And I mean, they're still, I don't know if they're still, after it got taken over by Amazon, by Jeff Bezos, I think things changed a little bit.
Yes. Yeah. But could you talk a little about, because I know you had the farm in Florida, but just some of the challenges I know through COVID and coming out of that period with the business?
Well, the farming in Florida was indeed a challenge. The weather in Florida being one of the biggest challenges, to be sure, with the hurricanes. But basically, Eberhard moved down there 6 months of the year, and I stayed here on Long Island. He would, same thing, harvest the product, and we would ship it up on tractor trailers, running it up to New York, and we would wash, pack, and ship out of Calverton. I would pop down to Florida at least once or twice a month. I would do, the HR, the food safety, the water testing, etc., and see my husband. And he would pop up to New York if I needed some equipment repair at the facility in Calverton. But it was tough. It was...
That was an interesting life for a while.
Yes. But,
there were challenges up here in Calverton, and there were challenges in Florida. And you never could miss the time when you needed to prepare for the New York season, or vice versa, the Florida season. You always kept an eye on the weather in every.
Well, we kept an eye on the weather even out west in California or Arizona, which is the growing region in the winter for the out west. There were times they had issues, freezes, and all of a sudden we were the only people who had baby leafy greens because we were in Florida and didn't get the freeze that they got in Arizona. So we were in constant turmoil.
Yes.
Yeah.
No, that's definitely a challenge. And
I mean, the challenge when you in a place like Whole Foods, or any of the grocery chains, you can't stop supplying them you're going to be out of product for the next 2 weeks. No. They're not going to keep your shelf space because there's 10 other companies who will take over your shelf space.
Well, and they do their planograms,
right.
their diagrams that show what exactly goes where on their shelf space. They do it a year ahead of time. So if Satur Farms has this section in the refrigerated section, you've got to hold on to it.
It's kind of cutthroat.
And it's the same thing with wholesalers, distributors.
Yeah.
If
you're slotted.
you're slaughtered. If you tell them we have spinach, or we have wild arugula, or we have butterhead lettuces, or this or that or the other thing for the next 2 months or whatever it is, you better deliver, because they
don't want out of stocks.
They don't want out of stocks. And the problem is they could count on us to be there when we said we would be there. Because if we weren't there, they had to figure out how to get it from California to their warehouse in the time where we out. So if we could tell them a week ahead of time, which when you deal with the weather is not always possible, but we managed to keep a good relationship going with a lot of the wholesalers and distributors in New York City.
And we did that by basically walking on hot coals.
Yeah.
No, that seems stressful. And then there's some, like, that you can't really control some of the harvests with, if something goes wrong or if you lose some produce that year, you just have to deal with.
That's why we chose baby leaf as our main crop, the baby spinach, the baby arugula, the baby salad greens, because we seeded those every 3 to 5 days. So we always had a crop right behind it. So if we got hit by heavy rains and the spinach got shattered in the field, maybe it wiped out 1 or 2 rotations. Well, hey, by next week, we're already into the next seeding. So we always had product rolling. If you're growing tomatoes, you have maybe 2 or 3 rotations in the field. If you got hit, by hail, something, terrible, or, disease, you might have lost the crop for, a good chunk of the year. Not to mention the tomatoes are really only ripening on Long Island in August and September. Well, by September, the resort restaurants and people start thinking about, fall squash. They're not even thinking about tomatoes. So you have, 1.5 months to sell tomatoes? To us, that wasn't a sustainable crop. So even though we used to grow a lot of heirloom tomatoes, at one point we had like 60,000 plants, I remember. We just booted it from our program and kept with the product that we could continually rotate through.
I mean, and the problem with tomatoes on Long Island, and this is actually, if I have tomatoes, my neighbor will have tomatoes too. Even so, we were the first ones on Long Island to grow heirloom tomatoes. By the second or third year, there were heirloom tomatoes everywhere.
Well, that's sort of because I gave our
I know.
I took the tomatoes that we felt did best on Long Island, and I let other farms know which ones we thought did best so that they could then grow them, and we then bought from them. So we started doing business with other local farms. When Lyle Wells was doing asparagus and zucchini, hey, I'll buy from him. I don't need to grow it myself. He grows it beautifully because that's what he's concentrating on. And then we can sell it to restaurants. Jeff Rockcamp was growing beautiful sweet corn and fall squashes. I bought from him. So we were supporting all of the local farms who grew the quality produce that the restaurants wanted, and we had it in our distribution network. It was a lot of fun.
Yes. And then just looking at just the North Fork today and farming out here, the area has changed somewhat, and the price of the land and everything has gone up.
It's not so much the price of the land. What is the issue is that the way we see it, or at least I see it, for a farm to be sustainable and successful, you need critical mass. That means you need critical mass on land, because for me, the minimum used to be at least 200 acres, not less. Of course, if you do different crops, you can maybe get away with less, with 50 acres. But there is not a lot of 40-acre parcels around anymore. when we were faced with losing land, it wasn't easy to put together another 100 acres somewhere.
We don't own much land. We only own 18 acres. We've always leased land. And at times, that land was being sold. And so it was always a stressful thought that we might be losing a farm. The 140-acre farm that we had for over 20 years, we had a great relationship with the owners. But eventually, they too did sell. And yes, there's going to be homes built on that land. And it's sad for us, but everything evolves.
I mean, for farmers, it's very challenging to do what the two of us did, what Paulette and I did over the last 25, 30 years.
Yes.
We started from nothing. We didn't own a piece of equipment. I didn't own a screwdriver or a wrench or anything. Yeah. We had to buy every piece of equipment that we owned and that we used and we made a lot of mistakes. We didn't have anybody where we inherited land, or my grandfather or my father would let me use 20 acres of his land to start out. No, we didn't have anybody. We had our 18 acres where we live, and we had to buy the first tractor, we had to buy the second tractor, we had to buy a plow.
And every time that we grew and took on more land, we needed bigger equipment. Mm-hmm. And every crop took years to perfect. It probably took us 5-6 years to perfect our wild arugula, which was the crop we were most well known for. But everything, we just had to take it apart and until we were satisfied with the method and the quality.
And what I was leading to was the fact that, if you have a parent or a family member where you can start out of, you have a little bit more leisure. Mm-hmm. It's very expensive to buy farm equipment. It's very expensive to lease land or to acquire land. So you almost contempt to farm on a small scale, mm-hmm. Unless you have somebody backing you up with serious amount of cash, which doesn't happen in farming. Yeah. People don't invest in farms, which they should, because mm-hmm. what we gonna do when we have housing everywhere and.
Yeah, but just seeing some of the other farms out here, some of them are smaller and they've been in the family for a long time. So I think when I've talked to some of them, they don't see it as it's kind of a leisurely, or they don't see it as something that they're going to make money from, but they'll have a farm stand. And but
we didn't have that luxury to not see it as an especially after we quit our jobs in the city. Yes. This was our livelihood, and we needed to make sure that we were supporting ourselves and the people who worked for us. Mm-hmm. So, if you start out with some land that you own already, it's a whole different ballgame.
Mm-hmm. Well, we had a different concept. I mean, I think a lot of the fruit farms here, as well as even the vineyards, the wineries, mm-hmm. they're riding the direct-to-consumer model. And mm-hmm. that's something that, I don't know, didn't interest us as much. We wanted to sort of go beyond that.
Because it's not a
brand building
It's not
model.
Only not a brand building, it's more of, it's a very short window where you can really do this, maybe, except even the wineries in the wintertime, they're dead.
Yeah.
Right? Or the farm stands, they're closed. I mean, what are you going to do in the wintertime, sitting around and twiddle your thumb?
Yeah.
I mean, that's
we have too much energy for that.
Well,
yeah.
I mean, you know.
No, it's a model that works for them and that they have done with their generations, and it's not to be scoffed at. It just didn't suit us and our.
But like you said, to make something, this was your full-time job, so.
Well, and then there's also the other issue that when you buy equipment and you invest in your business, you have to make it financially sustainable. So how do you make it financially sustainable if you only work 5-6 months out of the year?
Yes.
You still have to make the payments in December or in January or in February and in March, you know, and you can't stop. The bank is not going to let you not pay your bills by the end.
It's like with some of the restaurants here, and it being more of a part-time year kind of tourist.
Very difficult. Eberhard constantly gets asked, "Why don't you open a restaurant out here?" He's like, "In a resort area? No, thank you."
It's too on and off, and
it's impossible.
Yeah.
I mean, if you would say to me, let's do a restaurant somewhere in the mountains, for instance, you know, or in the Swiss Alps or so, where there is summer and winter thing, you have a little gap for a month and a half or so. I would do that, but out here, what are you going to do in January? You're looking
January,
at
February, March.
Yeah,
you have to, like, people try to make all that money within the summer so that but it's tough.
Yeah.
It's very tough.
Yeah.
The bills don't stop coming.
Yes. And then I guess you've kind of touched on it a bit, but just for aspiring farmers and entrepreneurs looking to enter the agriculture sector, what advice would you offer based on your experience?
Well, I mean, that depends how much energy you have, you know, and how much you're willing to give of yourself. And listen, there were a lot of failures in our history too, where we say to ourselves, what did we get ourselves into? But you have to focus and be dedicated and just
never give up.
Don't give up. I mean, there's going to be...
You might need to pivot.
There is going to be a 3-inch rainstorm as sure as there is a sunrise every day. You know, that's going to happen one way or another. And some years it's worse than others. And some years you really have really good years. And farming humbles you. You know, it humbles you. It makes you realize how little control we actually have of what we are doing. You know, we try to control, but we are limited in our means to control things. You can do everything perfectly right, and within 6 hours or 3 hours,
wiped out.
You're wiped out. And you can't be afraid about that. I used to get so depressed when that happened.
I think we actually used to feel more grief with our employees. They would be so sad to see the efforts they put in the field, and to see something ruined. I think we felt worse for them than we did for ourselves, because we just knew we're just going to, going to get over it. We're going to get past it.
Yes. And then just looking at starting the business out here and living and working out here, what do you enjoy most about living on the North Fork?
The fresh produce, the fresh fruit. We can't wait till the berries and Wickham's fruit farm gets going. The fish. Our farmer friend, he and his friend go fishing. They just brought us some striped bass, and then a week later some bluefish, and I mean, the flavor, the freshness.
My neighbor goes clamming.
Oh, the clams!
I mean, it's just amazing. Or you go to buy some oysters or something.
Yes.
Local oysters, and
in our greenhouse we're growing romaine and chard over the winter, and now our cherry tomatoes are starting, and our cucumbers, and we live for that. And also for, I don't know, the cultural aspect out here. You know, we do love popping into the restaurants and yeah, the Rites of Spring Music Festival that's been going on now for about 8 years.
They just celebrated their 10 years. He told us on Sunday night.
Okay, so yes, and the wineries, we love tasting the new vintages, and so
it's interesting. It's very interesting. We're here now close to 30 years on the North Fork, and it's very interesting to see how it has changed, and not always for the better.
Yes,
but it has become more
dynamic,
thought after, and more dynamic. That's the right word.
It's being more, instead of just being more of a more unknown but quiet, and people have discovered it, but it's always like you have to take the
good with the bad.
When we first came out, you know, we were real city people, you know, in a way. And we would work on our farm, or we would do this, that, and the other thing, and repair stuff. We would try to go and have dinner somewhere at 8 o'clock at night. And every restaurant, we stuck our nose on there, and the doors were closed at 8 o'clock at night. I mean, now you can have a meal at 8 at night.
Well, now we eat dinner at 5 or 6, so we got used to the speed. We have the North Fork rhythm for sure.
Yes, and then just you mentioned some of the changes, but just looking to the future, what would you hope for the future of the North Fork and its community further down?
I think the town of Thoushold was relatively intelligent about not getting
overly developed,
and not getting national brands into town. We don't need another Starbucks or another, McDonald's or any of those. They can have them west of here, up island. It's fine, And if you need them, you don't need to live here, because then you don't understand the concept of the North Fork. You don't understand the beauty and the heritage of it. And I think it's for all of us who live out here and care about this island or this part of the world, it's for all of us to protect it and to maintain what we have here. I mean, that doesn't mean that we can't have more culture and more interesting things going on, or that we can't upgrade our sewage system or whatever, or the water system. We must protect the heritage and the part of the North Fork that we all cherish.
Yes, definitely. And then usually, just lastly, I like to ask if there's any other things. I think we covered quite a lot, but if there's any other things you'd like to say or discuss that we haven't talked about?
No, you ask all the questions. So
I think you did a great job.
Thank you.
With the interview.
Thank you. So I want to thank you so much for taking the time to come on the podcast today and share your story and talk about this wonderful business that you've started out here.
Well, thank you. It was really a pleasure to review our...
And it was also, it was great to meet some of the characters out here,
Yes.
The people from North Fork Welding to the local hardware store guys and all this. There are real smart people and dedicated people living out here who do a lot of good work here in the community. And it was really fun meeting all of those people.
Yes, absolutely. Definitely.
A big shout out to all of them.
Definitely. Oh, thank you.
Thank you, Christopher.
Well, I hope you enjoyed episode 166 with Paulette Satur and Eberhard Müller. I want to thank you for listening to the Floyd Memorial Library podcast, and we'll see you next time.